Three, two, one. Let me get my mic a little closer. Three, two, one. All right, so I know this is a little different from what I usually make. I usually like to make gameplay videos just so I can share my passion for the game and to just largely discuss, um, how to play a deck and, always have a little bit of fun with like, what's, kind of a goofy deck, with like Foxy Fridays and the Kuro video. The Kuro video was really fun to make. But there's one thing that I've kind of noticed. I pay a lot of attention to the Japanese meta. It's just largely how I like to prepare. I like to watch a lot of videos about how O9 is shaping up, and also I like to watch gameplay videos just to kind of see how decks tend to play out. And I saw a Twitter post, and I'll show it a little bit later, that I've noticed that in O9, Lucci is still dominant, or at least to an extent where he is arguably top 3 in the meta. With, I believe, the top 3 for O9 is Lucci, Purple Luffy, and Doflamingo. Now, it could be a case of decks finally catching up to Black, or Lucci specifically. And you could totally be and have that argument, right? You could totally say, well, Lucci's in a much better spot now. But based on what I remember, the set and largely how O9 started, Lucci didn't see as much play. And as a black-yellow player, black-yellow Luffy is seeing significantly less play overall. Now, he's still strong, he's still powerful, and he's not as bad as people kind of, tend to give him credit for in O9, but he's to a much lesser extent being played. There's a lot more diversity. But Lucci is still consistent in the meta. And I really thought that was interesting, because I thought out of all the sets, I thought O9 was kind of one of those sets that really understood that you need to bring, if you're going to make a new leader, it has to be strong. And I thought they did a great job with Shanks. I really like Blackbeard. Buggy is funny. And I like Lim personally. Now, not everybody, here or there. And Robin is okay. Robin is kind of conditional, but I think Robin is a good direction for Yellow, and I think that they should definitely try to give Yellow a lot more cards like the Nico Robin 6 cost. As much as I don't particularly love its effect, Yellow kind of needs it. And Nico Robin has seen very little, but to some extent, success. So we're going in the right direction with Yellow. But the thing that I've noticed is that Lucci is still dominant. And a lot of other people have noticed this, and one of the things that a lot of people have talked about is, do we need bans? Now, based on Bandai's previous action, I'm going to be totally honest. I don't think they're going to ban anything. Do I think Lucci needs a ban? Absolutely. It's the same thing with Red Purple Law. They banned a card that was very strong in Lucci, and I assumed would help kind of make the matchup a lot more bearable. And to a very strong extent it did. Banning Annie's Lobby was a good decision, in my opinion. However, one of the things I have personally noticed is that this deck still works, even though in O9 it literally got no support at all. The deck list has barely changed. And granted, you can look at my list and say, that's not optimal, that's not good, this, that, something else. You can always look at my list and say, I would prefer this over that, or you should be running 4 Sabos or 4 Brooks or something like that. And, totally respectable opinion, right? This is just the list that I've kind of been tweaking at since about OP07 when he came out. And one of the things I've noticed is that when we're talking about what should be banned, I think that a lot of people tend to put pressure on the Moria. And while I agree that Moria was a completely overtuned card and should definitely have had some sort of a restriction to kind of make him a lot more balanced, like, I don't know, making characters come out rested or restricting it to Thriller Bark. Everybody tends to have their own Gecko Moria fix-it problem. But I don't think they're going to ban this card. I think at this point it's a little too vital for Black unless they offer like a huge amount of, consistent options for Black as a color. And I generally don't don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to go to the point of giving all of the good black decks alternatives to this card or just making a complete alternative to it. I highly, highly doubt that they're going to do that. It is my preference, but I generally think that they're not going to do that. I really don't think they're going to do that. So instead, I want to particularly talk about the cards that I think should be hit and what we can do about them. Now, this will not be popular, but I think passively, personally, I think a card that should be hit to some extent is Jack. I think when it comes to power scaling, Jack is a very close second to Gecko Moria. He's incredibly consistent. And with Lucci ability, he can KO a 4-cost the moment he's played with the snap of your fingers. Now, granted, so can Moria, and he gets way more value if you can pull the whole Spandine combo off. But I think that having the consistent KO can be a bit of a problem, and especially in matchups like Reiju, you can do a Tempest Kick, Leader Effect, and if it all goes off properly, Jack will KO anything on like a Reiju's board. And granted, Reiju can come back from that, but I think it does kind of illustrate a bit of a problem with how black cards, and especially top-end black cards, are designed. But, that's just me. I'm not a fan of it. I think having consistent KO of 3-cost isn't good for the game, especially considering that there's decks like Zuro, and in my opinion, the deck I've had a lot of experience with, Foxy, just dropping one of these absolutely shreds those decks, and there is barely anything they can do about it, just simply because of just how big of a card it is. And I really, really hope that they offer better removal for this card, because it's a counter to its own color, and the only real decks that this card isn't really affecting is largely currently blue and yellow, because they can Red Rock or no, I'm thinking of the Enel card that KOs anything, but you have to trash life. So to some extent, I think that this Jack card should be hit, but you're probably like, well, why not Gecko Moria? And that's fine. You know what? Let's just ignore Jack, right? Let's just not talk about top end, and let's talk about the cards that I think should be hit. And I think that card is Spandine. I think it is 100%. There is no debate, in my opinion, that the card that needs to be hit out of all of Lucci to decrease his effectiveness is Spandine. And I think the reason that people don't really think of Spandine all that often is that it's run at like a 2 of or a 1 of, right? But that's not like the point, right? Because the moment you get one into trash, or you get it on board or something like that, your opponent is not going to really be able to react to it. They either swing into it, which Lucci doesn't care about, because if he drops another Gecko Moria, he can just do the whole combo again, and Spandine continuously gets value. And I think that not only should Spandine have a higher amount of cards returned, like, having a character come in rested isn't enough, right? In my opinion. So, for this card to work, which basically you're comboing this Spandine with Rebecca and Lucci. Let's say, hypothetically, you don't have to spend any, you don't have to use your other Gecko slot for a Suru or Helmeppo, for whatever reason, right? Let's just say you have enough Tempest Kicks and Ice Ages to deal with their board, right? Because if you're nearing the end of the game and you're kind of dominating, your opponent likely won't have too many characters out. They'll likely have 1 or 2. And Lucci can pop 2 bodies, and that's something we can talk about. But largely, you can then Spandam effect. Let's say you whiff, right? Hypothetically, which you probably won't. But there are plenty of times where you will whiff. So let's just say, hypothetically, you whiff. And then you also Leader effect in the same turn. That's 5 cards. Spandine plus Lucci requires 3 CP cards and then a 4th. So you need 7 cards in total, 4 CPs, and then 3 random for this to work. In the situation where you whiff with Spandam, and let's just say you also Leader effect, that's 5 cards. You are only losing 2 cards out of trash for this combo to work. It is far too consistent if they get the pieces that they need. And granted, my deck is not running a ton of CP. They could be running a lot more than me. But there is more than enough CP cards for this combo to work consistently. And I think that is the main issue here. If we're going to ban anything, I genuinely think that it needs to be Spandine. You can make an argument for Ice Age. Ice Age is incredibly frustrating to play against. And you can totally argue that you can ban Ice Age. But going into a meta like 09 with buffed up Dofis, Luccis are running Soap Sheep, which gives -2 cost to 2 characters, from what I remember. And anything else, they'll just Ice Age, right? Still, I still think that the ability to play out a blocker that is frustrating to deal with, except like if you're playing red and you play the Robin, which not a lot of red decks are running the Robin. So basically you just kind of have to force your way down mid with this blocker. It has a high enough cost where you can't really do anything about Rebecca. Rebecca is just very strong, and off of a Gecko you can draw multiple 2Ks and refill your hand, which is insane, right? And if we're not going to ban Gecko Moria, which I've made it very clear, I generally do not think they're going to ban Gecko Moria. There's legitimately no way. I will put my entire black-yellow Luffy list on the fact that Gecko Moria will not get banned ever. They will never ban the card. If that happens, I'll do a giveaway for it, legitimately. I am very strongly confident that they're not going to ban Gecko Moria. So I think that the card that needs to be hit is Spandine, because of its effectiveness, because of the fact that it plays out a blocker, because when you play Gecko Moria, you don't have to pick between Lucci or Rebecca anymore. Instead, you can just do both, which was what made Sokka in 05 completely busted. Because of the fact you could Rebecca cost reduction into a Lucci with leader effect, and you would basically KO whatever you wanted. It's basically that combo, but on steroids with a 9K body, which is insane. Every single other black deck has to choose. The only example where I would say they don't have to is black-yellow. And in that situation, yeah, you got me. Black-yellow is strong because of Moria. I think we're all very aware of that fact. You know? But you're like, oh, but black-yellow can do it. Well, yeah, he can. But at the same time, he is usually losing a card, right? He's losing 2 cards. Then he can, hypothetically pop something. So he does lose cards, right? Regardless of, however you choose to frame it, black-yellow is losing cards. Losing a card at minimum. Yeah, at minimum in order for Gecko Moria to work. Lucci gets card advantage. All he's got to do is play this out. And with Tempest Kick, he draws the card back. So, generally, if they're not going to ban Gecko, and if they don't want to ban the leader, which is, totally fair and respectable, I tend to think that we need to avoid banning leaders, and we need to prioritize banning the cards that make those leaders busted. Because it's very rarely, in my opinion, the actual leader that is breaking it. It's usually 1 or 2 cards that tend to have the problem. Like when it came to Red Purple Law, I didn't think having 8 copies of Gordon was a good play. Or I don't think I was a big fan of having Kid and Killer. It's preference. At the end of the day, it is entirely preference. But if I'm being 100% serious, I genuinely don't think Lucci should be able to play out a blocker and a 6K base. It just should not. He should not be able to do that as consistently as he does. And I think the best way to change that is to ban Spandine so that he has to basically optimize and use Gecko like literally everyone else does. I have also played a lot of Mono Black Luffy. And Mono Black Luffy is fairly decent into Lucci. But the thing I've also noticed is that with him, you have very limited KO options. because Moria either has to play out a Rebecca into a Brook, which KOs a 0 cost, or you play out a Jack for KO. And I think that, if we're not going to ban any of the top end, which I highly doubt we will, but you know what? I would be very happy to see that otherwise. Let's say, hypothetically, we choose to ban Gecko, right? I think Lucci will probably be in a much healthier spot. Rebecca and Lucci in like a Helmeppo or something is still insanely powerful. Let's not get it twisted, okay? It's still insanely powerful. Rebecca can still bring back Jax from the trash, so no matter what, Lucci can bring back his top end, which is insane, and was like the only weakness that this deck had, that sometimes you're just going to mill over your top end, but you can bring it back with Rebecca, which is completely ridiculous. I still cannot believe they did that. But hey, that's just me, right? But yeah, I genuinely think that Spandine is the card that needs to be banned. And I feel like overall, we can have a very healthy discussion about this. But I don't think that Lucci needs to be as prevalent as he currently is in the meta. And I think that the best way to solve this problem is to ban Spandine.